Okay, good. Glad to see you. What local are you?
ENU, Einstein.
Einstein. Okay, thank you. And then Kathy Santee, is she here? I think I see her. So I'm gonna mark her as here. Kyle, I see you're here. Hey, how's it going, Kyle? Lori Schmidt. No?
Everybody, the session is being recorded, so just make sure you have consented. I think everyone has, but
Okay, I see Deborah. Again, I apologize for mispronouncing names, but Deborah Kushine.
Perfect.
Okay, good. That one worked. What about Sharon? Sharon Burns, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, great. What about Linda Drysbaugh?
I'm here.
Great. Linda, what local are you again?
Geisinger CMC.
CMC. Okay, good. What about Donna Berkowitz? Is she here today? Okay. Jane, is Jane here? Jane Roggiani? No? Okay. What about Day Day? Is Day Day Yantown? Okay. What about Vicky Redden? Is Vicky here? No? Okay. And Andrew, you're here. I see that. So, all right. Sorry about that. I just wanted to mark down kind of who was able to make it out of the list of attendees.
Bridget Wallace is here.
Oh, Bridget, hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Same here.
Okay.
and
good. I got you
Ryan,
down.
Marty Harrison is also going to attend this as soon as she's on another call, but she'll
Okay.
be there.
Gotcha. All right. So, welcome to the 2021 House of Delegates Treasurers Training. Obviously, it's a little different since we're doing it through Zoom. But I put together this slideshow, which just kind of help us walk through some of the things I wanted to go over today. And I wanted to start with some of the most basic elements of being a treasurer. Since some of you are going to be starting up new locals or are new treasurers or have never been to this training before, I figured it'd be good to kind of start with the very basics, right? So now you're a treasurer. So what does that mean? What that means is, you're responsible actually for certain things within your union. And in order to be good at those things, it's very important that you keep good, accurate records. That's why I put that right at the top, because that's probably one of the most important jobs of the treasurer. And it's often why there is no distinction in some locals between treasurer and secretary, because you have to keep such good and accurate records. And there are so many things that are important to kind of keep along with being the treasurer. So the reason that you need to keep such good records is because there needs to be a procedure for how you disperse funds, and you need to adhere to that procedure, and then the record keeping comes into play as a way of proving that you are, doing those things, right? And that procedure should also kind of be laid out in your local's bylaws, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. Also, as treasurer, there are certain DOL and IRS filing requirements. They are kind of the two regulatory bodies that oversee unions and nonprofits and have a set of rules for like what you have to do. So I'm sure that a lot of you have a lot of questions and are going to have a lot of questions at the end. But I wanted to point out that there will be a treasurer's training manual that I uploaded before the session, but also I'm going to send out in an email to everyone as well as this PowerPoint. So Andrew, if you could just click, you probably see a little,
Yeah.
that's what it's going to look like. And you'll be getting that from me at the end of the session. So what are the first steps into having a local union with local funds, right? First thing you're going to have to do, right, is open a bank account. In order to open a bank account, your local needs to get an EIN number, also known as a tax ID number. And in order to get that, you have to fill out this IRS form, which is called an SS4. Now, on this form, I've highlighted some of the areas which, often come up as questions when filling this out. The first thing would be section 9A, the type of entity you are, right? So your type of entity is other, and it's a labor union, right? So you check other and you write in labor union, because that is what you are when you're applying for an EIN. Also, number 10, the reason for applying. This is very simple, just for banking purposes to open a bank account, right? Now, number 12 is also very important, because this is where you pick your fiscal year end date. And this is important because it needs to be consistent, right? So there are various forms that you're gonna have to fill out for the DOL and for the IRS, and almost all of them are gonna ask you for your fiscal year end date, right? And so when you pick that date on this form, it needs to be the same as your LM1, which needs to be the same as your 1024, okay? So that date is gonna become very important because that is like the close of your accounting year, as this says, also known as the fiscal year end date. So you just wanna keep that in mind. And then once that date passes every year, there's going to be certain filings that you're required to prepare and fill out and submit to IRS DOL. The next one that I've highlighted here would be number 16. And that's the check the box, which best describes your business. You're not really a business, you're a nonprofit organization. But again, other and then labor representation would be the best answer here. And then for number 17, which is, indicate what kind of services you provide, it's representational services. That would be the best answer for 17. Now, once you fill out that SS4 and send it in, you're going to get a letter back, which looks like this. This is an example of the one that St. Chris got back, actually, for their local. And right where I blacked out, or redacted, if you will, that's where they're going to give you your employer identification number. And again, this is also a tax ID number, but this is the number that is going to identify you to the IRS. And it's also the number that, you won't be able to open a bank account without this number. Unless you open it with your social security number, but that's a very bad move, because then you're mixing up your identity with the identity of the local, and that could cause problems. All right. So the next step after you've registered with the IRS is kind of registering with the DOL. Now, what I put on this page right here is actually a 20-year-old document from PASNAP. This is our original LM1. This document is still filed away with the DOL. This document is still on file with the DOL as how it identifies PASNAP. The reason this document hasn't had to be updated is because you have to do annual filings with the DOL also, and that's where you're going to submit changes to your constitution and bylaws, as well as several other things which kind of update your identification as a union with them. So as you can see, back then, Terry Evans was the president, and things are much different than they are now. On the next page, we'll see kind of what the LM1 looks like now. But for the most part, it's still pretty similar.
How do you get that form?
So there will be links to that in the treasurer's training. The treasurer's handbook. There's a few links on how to get it. But honestly, if you just open up a Google and type in LM1 PDF, you'll get the downloadable version. If you just type in LM1, it'll send you to the DOL website, where you can file it online. So it's very easy to find, but there will also be links in the handbook that I'll be sending out later. Now, this is a copy of what the form looks like now. When you're filling this out, you're going to say, yes, this is an initial LM1, because you're only going to do this once pretty much. The only reasons you would have to amend this is like for drastic changes such as your fiscal year end date. But if you can see as number 2, item number 2, that's where you put your fiscal year end date on this form. And again, that has to be consistent as the SS4. You are private on items 12, 13, you are private industry employees, you are a local. And item 14, most of you, not all, but almost everyone here, I think, except for Jennifer, would be less than 10,000 for your local, right? So the reason that item 14 has those breaks, 10,000 and 249,999,000, is because that's going to trigger what type of form you file annually, whether it's an LM3 or an LM4, an LM3 or an LM2, right? So LM2 would be the highest, which is more than $250,000 a year, but none of the locals would be at that level. Then when you go to item 15, you're just going to list the officers which have titles such as president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, grievance chair, membership chair, and anybody who would get a stipend, really. That's what they're interested in. You don't have to list any at-large officers. And then 16, if you know what your dues and fees are going to be, that's where you put that. Typically, it would be like, let's say there are $2 a month, you could put that, or you could put $24 a year. But that's kind of where the breakdown is going to be. As far as working dues, installation fees, transfer fees, work permits, none of our locals have that, so those will all be blank. Now, this is where the form gets a little interesting. What they're asking for here is they want you to transpose the answers to these questions from your bylaws. And so when filling this out, I highlighted the ones that should be in your bylaws, generally speaking, right? So you should have qualifications for restriction of membership. You should have an authorization for disbursement of labor organization funds. That's just the process for approvals of, disbursement of funds. There should be a procedure, though, for calling regular and special meetings. There should be a procedure for selecting officers. There should be a procedure for disciplining and removing officers. Authorizing bargaining demands, ratifying contract terms, and authorizing strikes. Those are kind of the big ones. Now, what you're going to put in the section next to it is for qualifications on membership. That's going to be very early in it would be like page 1, article 1 or article 2, section 1, and that's kind of what they want there. For the other ones, you're going to hit the described in item 19 and just say there will be no procedure for this. Very simple, straightforward. All right, I think we can move on. Does anyone have any questions, though, on the LM1 or the SS4 so far?
So like Ryan, what you did for, it's probably a stupid question, but what you did, remember, like a month ago, was that like when you had to put those filings in, remember, and you needed like my information and stuff? Mm-hmm. Was that something that you normally do, or just like, is all this stuff that you just said is something that like we have to do every year at tax time? Me, yeah, not you, or you just help me out that one. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's the thing, is I'm available to help. The only thing is I need some help from you also in order to get those annual filings in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like what you're asking about is the LM3 and 4. Okay. I believe it was an LM4 for your local, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And so in order to fill that form out, I just kind of, mm-hmm. because it asks for financial information, I need that financial information from you in order to prepare it, and then approval from you to submit it on your behalf. So yeah, if you want me to submit that form for you, you just got to like kind of communicate and
Okay.
get in touch with me so that I can fill it out for you.
Like
And I knew
around,
that
like
your local
tax
had some
time.
changes, so that's why I
Yeah.
was trying to find you.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, so I've only been doing it for like the past 6 months or whenever right before, I guess we ratified, I don't know, but whatever. We had our elections late. I think it was August. So I've only been doing it for like 6 months or whatever. So I wasn't even aware I had to do that stuff. So I really appreciate you getting in touch with me.
Yeah, it does get a little confusing. And I know
Mhm.
that like when officer changes happen, it doesn't always get explained to the new officers, like the responsibilities for these things.
No, so literally that's what I'm saying. Like I just got handed a checkbook, which I ended up having to go get more checks anyway, because I couldn't use the old ones with, you know what I mean, all the contact information from the previous treasurer. But like I got his checkbook, that was it. Like I never got told anything else, or I don't have anything on file. Like you said, stuff should be on file. Like I
Yeah.
don't have that stuff.
So I'm actually next about to go over kind of a basic LM4, which is what most of the local units in PASNAP file.
Mhm.
There are a few which hit LM3 territory, and it's like a little bit more information, but it's not that much. Like once you understand the forms, it's not that hard, in my opinion. I mean, maybe, but that's why I'm here. Also, is like, you know, anytime you have a problem or a question, you know, like my contact information is at the bottom of all my emails, and you should be
Okay.
able to just give me a call and I can help you explain it or walk you through it, whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Any other questions before we move on to annual DOL filings?
How would I find that end date? Because I filed the EIN a while ago and I don't see where the end date would be.
Okay.
Would you have that?
That's a good question. I don't know if you sent me a copy of the SS. So, all right, let me just get this straight. You got a return letter from the IRS already with a,
Yes, I've had that for a little while. Yes.
okay, with an EIN number on it.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
I would, if you have that return letter still, it might be on there.
Yeah, I was looking. I didn't see it, but
If it's not,
can I call them?
I was gonna say that. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll email you after this.
Okay. No problem.
Okay, I might need to look something up because I might have a copy of what you filed.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good. Okay.
Oh yeah, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna talk about annual DOL filings. Like I said, these are the other LMs, 2 through 4. None of the locals will be large enough to file LM2s. Those are the very complicated large ones. PASNAP files one of those every year. But basically, the local has 90 days from that date that we discussed, the fiscal year end date, 90 days from that date to file. And these forms, they don't really extend them. They just, you know, you got to file no matter what. And if you do, you know, let's say you file and it's wrong, what you do is you file an amended form. So it's better, in other words, to file on time with inaccurate information and then fix it later, as opposed to miss that that filing deadline. Because that filing deadline would, you know, once you miss it, it triggers a red flag, which could trigger an audit. And that is what the DOL does, is they audit you if they think there's some sort of misappropriation going on or something like that. But yeah, as I said, the local files LMs 4 and 3, and that last bullet just kind of illustrates the level that would trigger that change from LM 4 to 3, which is $10,000 in receipts, which in all of our cases would be dues. This is a copy of an LM4, right? So what's going on here is every local gets a file number. Once you file that LM1, you'll get a return letter similar to the one that came from the IRS that I showed. That'll have your file number on it. You want to keep that because that's how the DOL is going to identify your local. Then you have the period. Oh, sorry, go back. Then you have the period that we're covering, which would be the fiscal year which just passed. Then there are options for amended, hardship, or terminal. You file an amended one if you've already filed and you realize something was wrong, you want to fix it. You file a terminal if your local is like ceasing to exist. We've had to file terminals for Hahnemann, for example, we filed a terminal report for the CRNAs up in Wilkes-Barre because they have a new employer now. They're negotiating a new contract, like things like that. That means their local kind of dissolved. That's basically everything that's going on the first page. It's just identification stuff. As you can see, there's a spot for the president and a spot for the treasurer. So the president and the treasurer need to sign off on this form whenever it goes to the DOL. And often when I prepare them for the locals, I just need an email from the president and the treasurer saying it's good to go in order for me to be able to file it for you. Now, if you want to look at page 2, numbers 9 through 18, this is where it asks for financial information. This is where it asks for, like, when's your next officer election? Do you have a bond? All locals, all unions need to be bonded, right? That's a requirement of the DOL. It also asks if you have any debts, basically. Like the first thing, number 9, changes to your constitution and bylaws, right? So if you have changes to your constitution and bylaws, you need to file new copies of those. If your organization changed its rates of dues, that should also, I mean, that doesn't have to be in the bylaws. If you have dues, though, it should be in the bylaws that you have dues. When the rates change, there should be a procedure for that. But it doesn't necessarily trigger that you have to amend your bylaws once the dues change, but you do have to file the change with the DOL again. On an LM3, it'll ask you what your rates are. So it's kind of just presented in a different way here. And then, did your organization discover any shortage of funds or property? You know, that's almost always a no, but that's like realizing that you're missing assets. Most of the locals don't really have too many assets, so that's almost always a no. And then, was your local insured? We actually carry bonds for all the locals, except for Butler, because they have their own. So the answer to that one's always yes. It's just the amount, you know, and that's kind of based on how much money you have. So the trigger for this is 10%. Whatever you take in during the year, let's say that's $5,000, and then whatever you have in your bank account, let's say that's $10,000. That means you got to have at least $1,500 in bonding insurance, basically. That's like the DOL's requirement. And then how many members? So you got to know how many members, or what I do is I typically count the last couple dues reports, and that's kind of how I determine that one. Enter the total value of your organization's assets. This is where the financial comes in, 14 through 18, right? What they want to know is how much money you have. Do you have any liabilities? That one's almost always 0. Total receipts. So there's only 4 boxes there because it can't be 10,000. That would trigger the next form. Receipts equal dues, though. It's income, it's dues. These are all just different terms for the same thing. Then gross disbursements. That's how much your organization spent. And then payments to officers. They always want to know how much money went to officers. In the LM3, you actually have to separate it out by person, right? So each person has their own line item, and you have to disclose how much they got. All right. Next, I want to talk about tax.
Real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just coming into this, not really, I wasn't given much info in either, but how are we supposed to know that we're bonded and have the proper rates?
Okay. So all the locals are bonded by PASNet, except for Butler, like I said. If you're interested in how much your local is bonded for, I can give you that information. I can also send you a copy of the certificate. And to answer the question of how you're supposed to know, all you got, I mean, I guess you just have to ask, to be honest. Because yeah, you're not going to know unless, who was it before Amy? Like, unless Amy had disclosed to you that, you know, this information when she handed you the checkbook and gave you access to the bank account and you took over as treasurer. Like, unless she had told you this stuff, like, you're not going to know. How else would you know? But that's kind of why I'm here. And you can call me, ask me these questions anytime you want. Anytime there's something comes up or there's a problem, just give me a call, shoot me an email, and I can get you, whatever information you need, such as like the rates of local dues for your local, and your bonding information, that kind of stuff. But all the locals are bonded through Eberts and Harrison, and the minimum is 2,500. So we don't have anybody who's bonded for less than that. And then we I run an audit every year. If I'm filing your LM report, if I'm preparing it, I keep a track, excuse me, I keep a record of how much each local has. And I kind of monitor it to see if we need to increase your bond. So I run that audit once a year, just to make sure that we are in line and that 10% threshold is holding.
Awesome. Thank you.
You got it. All right, so tax exempt status, I want to talk about this. So this is something that is going to be kind of new because we haven't had any locals ever apply for this, with the exception of two, CCNA and ACMH, the RN unit. They are the only two who have ever applied for tax exempt status from the IRS. Obviously, PASNAP itself has it, but we can't, it's not something that can be transferred or even though we're the umbrella at the top, each local still needs to have its own tax exempt status from the IRS to actually be tax exempt, right? So in order to do this, you have to file something called a Form 1024. Now, this is going to be the most complicated form of all the forms so far, right? So, Andrew, if you could go on to the next page, I think. Oh, and filing that form also does include a charge of $600. I wanted to disclose that ahead of time too. All right, but we're ready. So this is what Form 1024 looks like, at least the first page. It's actually like 20 some pages, but you don't have to fill out all of them. As it disclosed, I have it highlighted up at the top. A user fee is required, which basically you got to fill out another form called Form 8718 and just check a box saying, hey, we're paying our user fee. That's kind of all that is. Now, the type of organizations we are, right? We are labor unions. So our tax exempt status is called a 501c5, which I have highlighted as number C under Part 1. Sorry, wait, could you go back a step? Thanks. Yeah, so I just want to make sure everybody sees that 501c5. That's what labor organizations are for tax exempt purposes. All right, now we can go. Okay, so this is the information you're going to need. I've kind of highlighted where you're going to have to fill out and what you're going to have to say in these sections. Part 1, they want you to describe your organization, right? You have to do it in a different way than like the Constitution states. So you're basically saying the same thing, you're just rewording it. You just want to talk about collective bargaining, representation in the workplace. Also talk about meetings that the board's going to have throughout the year, like the local board meets to discuss strategy and things like that. And that should probably be it for that section. You don't have to write too much. It's just kind of like, what does your union do? That's, if you answer that question in section 1, you're good to go. Section 2, you're going to want to talk about membership dues. That's how your local unit is going to get money. Again, if you don't have membership dues, then you're not going to need tax exempt status yet. This is kind of something that, once you have those local dues in place and you're collecting them, that's when you're going to need to get the tax exempt status. In section 3, same kind of thing as the LM1, you're going to want to list all the officers here with a title, and especially anyone who's going to receive a stipend, right? That's both these bodies, the IRS and the DOL, they're going to care the most about people who are getting money. That's kind of how they work. Now, number 5, this is where you're going to talk about PASNAP and the relationship between PASNAP and your local, right? Oftentimes it's called an international. The, you know, the, I guess the bargaining, trying to think of how to, the bargaining agent of record is a good way to put it. But that's what PASNAP would be, and that's also oftentimes called the international when you're referring to unions. Even though we're not international, we're just in Pennsylvania. Number 7, this is going to be the qualifications for membership. You can just restate what's in your bylaws here. Like, what does it take to be a member? Obviously, you got to work at the same facility and pay dues and, you know, all the things that it takes to be a member. And then number 8 is just your organization's assets will be distributed. Again, there should be a procedure for this in everyone's bylaws. It's recommended by me, at least, that there be a procedure for this. So you can just kind of restate that here. And then we have 9 through 16. For the most part, these are all going to be no, right? The only one which wouldn't be no might be, does the organization publish pamphlets and brochures, newsletters, journals, or similarly printed material? If you're going to say yes, they're going to want a copy / an example of one of these. But I would say it's no, because PASNAP probably does that, right? Like, we probably, like, you know, your organizer or your staff rep is probably an employee of PASNAP, and, you know, they probably print stuff, newsletters, journals, things like that. They probably print them here and then bring them to you, or, you know, whatever the case may be, it probably gets expensed to us. So you can put no. And then all the other ones are pretty much no. I can't, yeah. I think number 10 is the only one. No, yeah. See, that one's no too, because almost all of these, like for PASNAP, it might be yes, but for at the local level, it's going to be no. Part 3 is going to be the tricky part. This is where you have to put in your financial data. This is where I'm going to talk about this a little bit at the end, but this is where having a budget helps. If you haven't had a fiscal year end in which you were collecting local dues, you're probably not going to have some of this stuff. You're probably not going to know what your revenues and expenses are. If you've had an LM cycle go through, or you've been through multiple LM cycles, I have all this. You know, this is what, like, when you send me your financial data, at least in most cases, when you send me your financial data, I do this. I figure out what the revenue is, what the expenses are, what categories they go into. And so you just kind of got to put this in for the last few years. Or again, if you haven't started collecting local dues yet, you just kind of put your estimated budgeted expenses in, and then, you know, submit that with this form instead. Okay, then there's Schedule C. Again, like I said, there are going to be a bunch of pages in between Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule D, E, F at the end. They don't apply to you. Since you are 501c5 labor organization, Schedule C is the only one that applies to you, and it's just going to be 1 and 3, because 2 is just for fishermen's organizations. So what you want to do here is describe the services the organization performs for its members. But, you know, you've already described that in page 2. So that's why I put in here page 2, item 1, because it's basically asking you to restate what you've already disclosed. Then labor organization, that's what we are. They are asking for a copy of your collective bargaining agreement. So along with this, you have to send Constitution, bylaws, and collective bargaining agreement. Also, in terms of how to send it, they do accept it, I think, a couple different ways, but the easiest way, in my opinion, to do it is going to be along with Form 8718 and a check made out for $600 in the mail, right? That's going to be the easiest way to send this. And that I already went over. This is just a copy of Form 8718. It's just this page. You check A, you write 600. At the end of Form 1024 is a procedural checklist. Just because that form is slightly complicated, they have this in order for you to check off down the line as you, just to make sure that you're completing it properly. It says at the bottom, do not send checklist with application. All right, we can go on, Andrew. Thank you. Now, like I said, I want to talk about budgets. Oh, wait, actually, let's pause a second. Does anybody have any questions about Form 1024, tax exempt status, why you might need it, anything like that?
Ryan, you're going to send this this presentation to us,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
You're going to get the presentation and the updated officer's manual. Again, these forms are pretty easy to find, but if you need one and you can't find it or something, just email me. I can send it to you. So,
But you'll help us fill it out.
I'll help you fill it out. Yep, you can be filling it out and call me on the phone and just be like, just stay here on the phone with me while I fill it out. Like, that's fine. Like,
Okay.
That's what I'm here for, to help. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I did want to talk about budgeting. Again, budgeting is pretty important, but it's probably going to be somewhat new to a lot of you. It's an important tool, I think, because it helps zero in the organization's priorities. So when you're creating the budget, what you want to do is do it every 3 months or every year. And, you know, maybe the year's too far out. Maybe you just want to think about what your organization is trying to accomplish in the next 3 months. Let's say, you know, you want to have a couple meetings, you want to be able to pay for dinner, you want to buy t-shirts, things like that, you know. For the most part, at the local level, it shouldn't be incredibly complicated, but it's just a way to be able to strategize and think about down the road, think about what you're going to use the funds for, and think about what the priorities of the organization are, right? And that's why it's important for the board to be involved, because, you know, you're prioritizing what is important to the organization, the board, you know, all that stuff. Here's kind of an example of a fairly simple budget. This is actually taken from the treasurer's handbook, so this is also in there. But, you know, you have your revenue, and I put a couple other forms of revenue in here because sometimes, you know, you get revenue from a couple different ways. For the most part, obviously, it's going to be dues, right? That's what you're going to start with. Let's say you have a savings account, though. You might get a little bit of interest. Let's say also you hold a fundraiser, okay? So you got some donations, too. So you're going to want to itemize those, and then, you know, you have your total revenue here at the bottom, and then you move on to the expense section. Let's say, you know, this is what you spend on meetings and education. Per capita tax. Per capita tax would be like affiliation dues, like with an AFL-CIO or something like that. Let's say you printed some pamphlets and ordered some office supplies too. Made a couple charitable donations, and paid your officers a little bit. Let's say you also bought some like office furniture or something, or, you know, maybe computer, purchase of fixed assets. And all in all, actually, I'm realizing I'm making a mistake as I'm doing this. Fixed assets would actually be an asset and they wouldn't go under expenses, but that's just kind of an accounting nuance. The money was still spent, therefore it would be disclosed as expense on like an LM. So that's kind of why I just lump that into expenses. Total expenses here, and then net income at the bottom, right? So net income is going to be the revenue minus the expense. Then you got your net income. Pretty simple, but this is probably what most of your budgets would look like if you made a budget, right? So, and that's kind of it for the presentation. I wanted to open it up for questions here and, you know, see if anybody had anything that was left outstanding, anything I didn't touch on, maybe.
So we can go to any bank, is that correct? Or is there a certain bank that you would recommend?
No, you can go to any bank you want. The only bank that I would really recommend might be a credit union. They usually give better rates.
Okay.
But there's no restriction on that whatsoever.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Has anybody tried to fill out one of these forms and had a problem yet, or anything like that? I know Sharon, you said that you did the SS4, right?
Right, that's the only one I really did because we didn't have any money, so I didn't think we needed to do anything else.
Well, I kind of put them in order the way you should do them, in my opinion.
Okay.
You need the SS4 done to open a bank account at all.
Right.
I will say that I feel like because they're different reporting agencies, it's not going to be terrible if we can't find your fiscal year end date from that SS4,
Okay.
and we use a different one for the LM,
Okay.
because one's IRS, one's DOL. Also, there would be no procedure to change it with the IRS. So if you fill out like the 1024 and it's a different one than the SS4 was, you could just say, well, we amended. Whereas the DOL, like when you make a change like that, you have to file an amended LM1. So it's kind of more important for the DOL, to be honest.
Okay.
Oh, I just thought of something I didn't really touch on about the tax exempt status. Once you qualify, and you'll get another return letter. It'll say you're tax exempt, you're 501c5. Once that happens, you have to fill out annual 990s for the IRS. But if you're under 50,000, it's called a 990N. They also call it an e-postcard. It's the easiest form to fill out I've ever seen in my life. All you need is your EIN number, the address at which your records are kept, which is probably your home address, your principal officer's name, which is going to be your treasurer, and that's it. And then you send it in. They don't ask for any financial information. You just have to log in, put that stuff in, send, done. I talked about how LM reports are 90 days after fiscal year end. That one is 5 months after fiscal year end. So a little bit more time, and again, a very easy. I would recommend you just do them together because it's very easy.
Okay. So the $600, I can't really send that until we actually have money in our account, though.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So
That needs
that
to
might
come
take.
from the local, because the local is
Right.
paying the user fee for the tax exempt status. Yeah.
Okay.
And be very like, don't ever pay for something, you know what I mean, and like for the local and not like reimburse yourself, because like if it's for the local, it needs, like, the local funds need to pay for it, kind of thing. Like, you don't want a commingling situation with personal funds and local funds.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess that's kind of all I have. If nobody has any more questions, I think we're done.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah.
Thanks,
appreciate
Thank
it.
Ryan.
you.
All right, so again, I'm gonna email everybody with the stuff I said, the presentation, and the treasurer's training handbook. The handbook for treasurers.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Sounds
Have a
good.
good one.
Thanks
Thank-
again.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.